All right, listeners, let's talk AI and drones in warfare. I mean, it's a hot topic, right? And there's a lot of hype out there.
Yeah.
But we're going beyond the killer robots you see in the movies. This deep dive is all about how artificial intelligence is already changing the game on the battlefield. We're pulling our intel from a Strategic Vanguard podcast.
Yeah.
They really get into the nitty-gritty of how AI is impacting strategy. And you know what? It's not all doom and gloom. Some experts actually think AI could make warfare more precise, maybe even leading to fewer casualties. But before we get too optimistic, let's bring in our expert.
Hey, everyone.
You know this stuff inside and out, so break it down for us. AI and warfare. It's a bit of a paradox, right?
Yeah, it really is. AI has this potential to make warfare super precise and targeted, but at the same time, it introduces a whole new set of challenges, especially with how fast the tech is developing.
Totally. Like, we've all heard about these game-changing drones, the Turkish Bayraktar TB2, the American MQ-9 Reaper. They're already making a huge impact. But the podcast pointed out that this is really just the tip of the iceberg. We could be looking at fully autonomous drones in the near future. Drones that can identify and engage targets without any human input whatsoever.
That's right. It's a massive shift. Moving away from those remote control drones we're used to ones that are essentially making life or death decisions on their own. And it's not some distant sci-fi scenario anymore. These autonomous systems are being developed and tested right now.
Okay, wow. So that's both impressive and terrifying at the same time. I mean, it makes you think about those killer robot headlines. Are we really heading towards a Terminator-style future? But hold on, AI in warfare isn't just about individual drones going rogue, right?
No, definitely not.
The podcast talked about how AI is being used for strategy and decision-making on a much larger scale.
You got it. Think about AI systems that can analyze massive amounts of intelligence data, predict enemy movements, and even suggest the best attack strategies. That's exactly what the U.S. military's Project Maven is all about. They're using AI to sift through mountains of drone footage and identify potential threats.
It's like having a superpowered chess grandmaster on your side, except this grandmaster can process millions of data points in a second. That's amazing. But then the podcast mentioned something called swarm drones, which, to be honest, sounds straight out of a sci-fi war movie.
Yeah, swarm drones are pretty wild. Basically, it's what it sounds like. Hundreds or even thousands of small networked drones all working together. Imagine like a flock of birds, but with weapons.
Okay, now that's a visual I'm not sure I want in my head.
Countries like China, the U.S., and Israel are already experimenting with this tech, and the implications for warfare are pretty mind-boggling.
No kidding. So we've got these coordinated swarms, we've got AI picking out targets, we've got AI advising generals on battle plans. It really makes you wonder, where does human control even fit into all of this?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it brings us to one of the most contentious issues in this whole debate. Autonomous weapons, those so-called killer robots. The podcast highlighted how the UN is trying to ban these weapons internationally. But at the same time, you have countries like the US, China, and Russia pouring resources into developing them.
It's like we're standing at a crossroads. On the one hand, AI could make warfare more precise, potentially limiting collateral damage and civilian casualties. But on the other hand, we're talking about machines making life or death decisions. And that's a pretty terrifying prospect.
Yeah, it's a serious dilemma, and we can't just ignore the potential for unintended consequences. What happens if an AI system misinterprets data or gets hacked? War is inherently chaotic, and relying on complex algorithms in that kind of environment comes with inherent risks.
Okay, now I'm really starting to get nervous. So AI could make war more precise, but it could also make it more unpredictable and uncontrollable. And then there's this whole other issue of an AI arms race, which the podcast also touched on.
Right. It's a valid concern. Imagine nations competing to develop the most advanced AI-powered weapons, constantly trying to one-up each other. It's a scenario that could spiral out of control pretty quickly.
Definitely not a future I want to live in, but okay. We've talked a lot about the potential downsides of AI in warfare. The podcast did mention some potential benefits too, right? Like, could AI actually make war less destructive overall?
Well, some experts believe that's a possibility. They argue that AI could lead to more targeted and efficient military operations, reducing the need for large-scale deployments and minimizing civilian casualties.
That's a pretty hopeful thought, but it's also important to remember that it's still just a theory.
Exactly. We need to be realistic about the potential risks as well.
So we've got these two contrasting views. AI as a force for good in warfare, and AI as a potential recipe for disaster. It sounds like the future is far from certain.
And that's what makes this whole discussion so crucial. We're not just talking about some abstract technological advancement. This is about the future of warfare and potentially the future of humanity itself.
Okay, deep breaths, everyone. We've covered a lot of ground already, but we're not done yet. When we come back, we'll dive into some of the potential futures of AI in warfare, outlined in that Strategic Vanguard episode. And trust me, they're pretty mind-blowing. Don't go anywhere.
We'll be right back. So, when we were talking about the future of AI in warfare earlier, one thing that really hit me from that Strategic Vanguard episode was how this technology could completely change the global balance of power.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good point.
Oh.
Actually, I hadn't thought about it that way. But it's not hard to imagine how AI could give some countries a huge advantage.
Yeah.
Especially with the amount of money the US, China, and Russia are pouring into AI research.
Exactly. Think about it. What if a country develops truly autonomous weapon systems? They could suddenly engage in conflicts without risking their own soldiers' lives. That kind of strategic edge could be really tempting, even destabilizing.
It's almost like a whole new arms race. But instead of stockpiling weapons, it's about who has the most sophisticated AI.
Right. And it's not just limited to superpowers either. The podcast even mentioned how smaller countries or non-state actors could get their hands on AI tech.
Really? So, even terrorist groups could potentially use AI for warfare?
Potentially. It's not out of the realm of possibility. Relatively cheap and easy-to-use AI tools could be used to create surprisingly powerful weapons, or even to launch devastating cyber attacks.
Wow, so AI could actually make war more accessible to more people.
It's a double-edged sword. On one hand, AI could lead to more precise warfare with fewer casualties. But on the other hand, it could also make conflict more widespread and less predictable.
So it's kind of a mixed bag, I guess. More precise, but also more chaotic.
Exactly. And that's precisely why these conversations are so important. We need to be thinking about these issues now before things get out of control. Policymakers, military leaders, and the public need to understand the implications of AI in warfare, both the good and the bad.
So it's like we're holding this incredibly powerful tool, and we need to figure out how to use it responsibly before it backfires on us.
Absolutely. Education and awareness are key. We need to make sure that the people making decisions about AI are well informed about the ethical risks and long-term consequences.
It's not just about the technology itself, though, right? It's about the choices we make as a society, about how we use it.
Right. AI is a tool, and it's up to us to decide how we wield it.
Will we use it to build a more peaceful world or to escalate conflict?
Exactly. The future of AI in warfare isn't preordained. It's being shaped by the decisions we make right now.
Okay, so what can our listeners do? I mean, this feels like such a big, complex issue.
Well, the first step is simply to stay informed. Read articles, listen to podcasts like Strategic Vanguard, and have conversations about these issues with your friends and family.
Basically, don't be afraid to talk about it.
Right. The more we talk about it, the better equipped we'll be to make informed decisions.
So all our listeners out there, I encourage you to keep learning and keep the dialogue going. This isn't just some abstract sci-fi concept. This is about the future we're creating together.
And remember, while we need to be aware of the dangers of AI, we shouldn't let fear paralyze us. AI also has the potential for positive change. And it's up to us to explore those opportunities wisely.
I love that.
Yeah.
So while this deep dive has definitely been a bit of a reality check, it's also given me hope that we can steer this technology in the right direction. Well, the Strategic Vanguard episode left us with some pretty wild scenarios for the future.
Oh, yeah. Some pretty mind-blowing stuff.
So let's dive into those, starting with the possibility of fully autonomous warfare. This is where things get really interesting and maybe a little bit unsettling. So buckle up, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. It's been quite a journey exploring how AI is shaking up the world of warfare.
Yeah, no kidding. We've covered a lot of ground, from autonomous drones to AI-powered decision-making, swarm technology, the potential for an AI arms race. It's mind-boggling.
Totally. And we've talked about both sides of the coin, right? The
Yeah.
potential benefits of AI in warfare, like more precision and fewer casualties, but also the very real risks, like the possibility of machines making life or death decisions without human oversight.
It's a tough one for sure. There are no easy answers. But I do think that Strategic Vanguard episode we talked about, it really laid out the key issues and got us thinking about the kind of future we're creating.
Definitely. And one of the most thought-provoking scenarios they brought up was the possibility of fully autonomous warfare. Imagine wars fought mainly by machines with humans taking a back seat.
It's a wild concept, right? It makes you question the whole nature of war. And the role of humanity in conflict. What happens to courage sacrifice strategic thinking when it's machines calling the shots?
It's almost like we're talking about a whole different kind of war. One where human judgment and intuition become less important than algorithms and processing power.
Right, and then there's the question of accountability. If an AI-controlled weapon system makes a mistake, who takes the blame? The programmer, the military commander, the machine itself? These are questions we're only just starting to grapple with.
Honestly, it's pretty unsettling. But I think we have to face these uncomfortable possibilities. We can't just ignore them and pretend they're not happening. The future of warfare is being shaped right now, and we all have a role to play.
I couldn't agree more. And that brings us to another crucial point from that Strategic Vanguard episode, the possibility of international agreements to control how AI is developed and used in warfare.
They mentioned global AI arms control treaties, kind of like the treaties we have for nuclear weapons. Sounds like a good idea, but is it realistic? Can you really get all these countries to agree on something like that? Especially when it comes to military tech.
It's a huge challenge for sure, but I don't think it's impossible. Think about it. International agreements on nuclear weapons. They were once considered pretty unlikely too, but they happened. It took time, diplomacy, a lot of hard work, but in the end, nations recognized the shared threat, and they chose to cooperate.
So there's hope then. Even with this rapidly advancing technology, we can find ways to control it, use it responsibly, prevent those worst-case scenarios.
I believe we can, but it's going to take a collective effort. Open dialogue, international cooperation. We need informed citizens who are engaged in these issues.
I think this deep dive has left me with more questions than answers, but it's definitely sparked a sense of urgency. We can't just sit back and let the future of warfare unfold without having our say.
Absolutely. This conversation needs to continue. In classrooms, boardrooms, government halls, around the dinner table. The choices we make today will shape the future of AI in warfare, and that future is in our hands.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into AI and drone warfare. It's been a fascinating and honestly a little bit terrifying journey. But as we've learned, the future is not set in stone. We have the power to shape it. So let's keep learning, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going. The future depends on it. Until next time, stay curious.